So this is a video response to Dennis Prager at Prager University in a recent video of his, "If there is no God, murder isn't wrong." Now I've got to say that Prager University is about as much of a university as my garden shed. And I don't own a garden shed. What Prager University is effectively is just a YouTube channel with a load of videos stuck on it. So effectively, I suppose that you could say that this is Plum University responding to Prager University on this issue. Now, I know I'm not the first sort of YouTube atheist to respond on this issue, and I'm a little bit late to this particular party, but I have a life. Maybe some of those others don't. So I apologise that my response is a little bit late, but here it is. I hope it's worth listening to all the same. Okay, on with the business of the response.
Do you believe that good and evil exist? The answer to this question separates Judeo-Christian values from secular values.
Of course, the Dennis Pragers of this world see good and evil as something tangible in their own right, and a refusal to acknowledge other usages leads to a miscommunication right from the off. They love to suggest that without God, good and evil are meaningless terms. But I don't use these terms as nouns, I use them as adjectives. Judgments I apply to describe people and the acts they commit. Now, Prager would wave these away as meaningless opinions, but he's wrong. I think we would all agree that there are no objective definitions of stocky or arrogant. And yet, even in the absence of any divine decree mandating the explicit objective bounds of these words, I have never once had a Christian inform me that I should stop using them, that these terms are devoid of meaning, that only terms objectively defined by their God serve any useful purpose. And yet this is the claim being made when morality is involved. Why can we accept it is meaningful to judge you as stocky, tall, fat, thin, healthy, unhappy, kind, reasonable, brave, arrogant, emotional, funny, talented, irascible, foolhardy, reckless, miserable, or just full of shit? But good and evil? Oh, no. Unless you believe in my God, these words are meaningless. They're not meaningless, they are judgments. So to answer Dennis Prager's question, do good and evil exist? For me, this is a malformed question. He may as well have asked, does arrogant exist? A person can be evil as they can be arrogant, but both of these are just qualities we ascribe to people. There is nothing more mysterious or deeper than that.
Let me offer the clearest possible example. Murder. Is murder wrong? Is it evil? Nearly everyone would answer yes, but now I will pose a much harder question. How do you know? I'm sure you think murder is wrong, but how do you know?
This is a poor start. Prager may have thought that this was a really good example to pick, but it was about the worst one he could have picked. Is murder wrong? Yes. Why? Because it is wrong by definition. Dennis Prager didn't ask, is killing wrong? He asked, is murder wrong? And as murder is defined as wrongful killing, then obviously it is wrong. Perhaps he should have asked, when is killing murder? Because this is the interesting philosophical question. When is killing justified and when does it become murder? But instead, by way of analogy, rather than asking, is arresting someone wrong, he has asked, is wrongful arrest wrong? So my crap answer to his crap question is a tautological yes. If a killing isn't wrong, then, morally speaking, it isn't murder.
If I asked you how you know that the earth is round, you would show me photographs from outer space or offer me measurable data. But what photographs could you show? What measurements could you provide that prove that murder or rape or theft is wrong? The fact is, you can't. There are scientific facts, but without God, there are no moral facts. Every atheist philosopher I have read or debated on this subject has acknowledged that if there is no God, there is no objective morality. Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God of morality. In other words, only if there is a God who says murder is murder wrong? The existence of God only ensures that good and evil objectively exist and are not merely opinions.
But how does God or the existence of God provide us with these moral facts. This is a pretty substantial claim that Dennis Prager is making. He makes it 3 times, as you've seen here, and yet he makes it in such a way as if it appears that he doesn't even expect us to challenge him on this claim. But how does God's word objectify his moral prescriptions? When God says that stealing is wrong, how does that objectively make it so? When he says in Exodus 23:19 that boiling a baby goat in its mother's milk is wrong, how does that objectively make such a cooking method wrong? How does it make it immoral? The problem is deep-seated for me. It's not just that God does not appear to have the necessary characteristics in terms of the characteristics that Christians claim for him, but that I cannot even imagine what possible characteristics you could have, that you could possess, that would make your moral prescriptions objective facts. I think the 2 most cited characteristics of God that Christian apologists use as a basis for their claims that he can objectify morality would be his omniscience or his status as creator. But I don't see how either of these 2 things do the heavy lifting that is required. In terms of omniscience, no amount of knowledge of the universe can crystallize something into objective fact if it is not something of that nature to begin with. There is no explicit temperature when warm water becomes hot water. It is a matter of judgment, and the lack of objectivity is not due to a lack of knowledge on our part, but because warm and hot water are intrinsically subjective ideas to begin with. If ideas of morality are intrinsically subjective to begin with, then how does God's omniscience have any more bearing on that subject either? Others make the claim that, well, God created the universe, so he's the boss. He gets to decide what's right and wrong. And yet, whenever I fired that question back, they never accept the same logic. If I say, well, if I create a simulated universe and populate it with little simulated sentient life forms, do I get to decide what is right and wrong? Do I get to determine what is objectively morally true? If I see the universe in my science laboratory, do I get to determine what is objectively morally right and wrong within that universe? The answer that I get back is universally no. For some reason now, all of a sudden, that logic does not apply. So no Christian can tell me why God's moral prescriptions are definitively moral. So I am being expected, even as a non-believer, to accept what they say on faith. Look, it is one thing for a Christian to accept the validity of their claims on faith, but to expect non-believers to accept it on faith is ludicrous. Why can't I demand, on the same grounds that they accept on faith, that the moral wrongness of theft is just an intrinsic property of our universe? Why? Why can't I do that? Why is it a property of our universe? Who knows? Just accept it on faith. It just is. Do you find that satisfying? No, neither do I, and it's no more satisfying just because a God is involved.
In a secular world, there can only be opinions about morality. They may be personal opinions or society's opinions, but only opinions. Only if there is a God who says murder is murder wrong? Otherwise, all morality is opinion. The entire Western world, what we call Western civilization, is based on this understanding. Without God, we therefore end up with what is known as moral relativism, meaning that morality is not absolute, but only relative to the individual or to the society.
I think the big fear for the likes of Prager is that unless we have an objective definition of morality, an immutable shopping list of right and wrong, then moral claims are boundless and effectively anything goes. In many ways, to refer back to my earlier example of other terms we judgmentally ascribe to people, it is akin to saying that unless we have a divinely decreed objective definition of slim, what is to stop society regarding a 600-pound super morbidly obese bed whale as being slim? The answer is the same in both cases. Subjective does not mean either without basis or unbounded. Few would argue that our evolved sense of taste is objective. We all enjoy different foods. Yet the very reason we evolved a sense of taste is what constrains it and keeps every sane one of us from putting rotting fish guts and animal excrement on the menu. If, like me, you believe our sense of morality is also an evolved trait, then it is immediately obvious that just like tasting food, whilst there may be subjectivity in our individual judgments, that these judgments are also ultimately constrained and bound by the evolutionary purposes they serve. Of course, I have to acknowledge at this point that many atheists agree with Prager rather than me. Not that God exists, of course, but that for them, they believe morality and moral oughts have an objective basis. But what is interesting to me is that in many ways, whether morality ultimately has an objective basis or otherwise is irrelevant. After all, for all of Prager's scaremongering about immoral, irreligious societies, the truth is that there has been both benign and truly horrific examples of both secular and religiously founded societies. Indeed, for all Prager's talk of objective moral standards and moral facts, every Christian apologist I have ever heard readily admits that we do not know God's perfect moral code. So even if this objectivity exists, the reality is that every single society in human history has had to rely upon subjective human moral judgment. And that includes all the Christian ones.
Without God, the words good and evil are just another way of saying, I like and I don't like. If there is no God, the statement murder is evil is the same as the statement I don't like murder.
So I think what Prager is trying to sell his audience here is that effectively the only alternative to his position is some kind of emotivism. And the idea that when people say something along the lines of murder is evil, that what they mean is, I don't like murder. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that when we say something along the lines of murder is evil, that rather than expressing an emotion, I don't like murder, we're making a moral prescription. We're saying murder is wrong. And I think there's a much stronger evolutionary basis for that having been the case. If we've evolved this overriding sense that we want to make moral prescriptions, then surely this must be about our way of influencing the social world. Surely everybody can see the evolutionary advantage in that. There's no evolutionary advantage in just saying something, well, really, I don't like murder very much, but there is a great deal of advantage to trying to dissuade other people from doing things which are against our interests, such as murdering, such as stealing, such as raping.
It is also not a coincidence that the first societies in the world to abolish slavery, an institution that existed in every known society in human history, were Western societies rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And so were the first societies to affirm universal human rights, to emancipate women, and to proclaim the value of liberty.
And I will tell you what else is not a coincidence. It's also not a coincidence that these things happened as Western societies became more secular in their thinking and started to base their morality on something beyond simply religious scripture and dogma. I would also have to pick up Dennis Prager on this claim that slavery has existed in every known society. There is in the world today about 100 uncontacted peoples around the world. These are indigenous groups, tribes that have had next to no contact with the rest of the world. I can find no evidence whatsoever on the net that all these groups are keeping slaves. In fact, I cannot find any evidence that any of them are keeping slaves. So how does Dennis Prager make the claim that every known society in history has kept slaves? Bullshit, Dennis Prager. Bullshit.
So then, whatever you believe about God or religion, here is a fact. Without a God who is the source of morality, morality is just a matter of opinion.
And here is a fact to leave you with, Dennis. Your claim that a God provides an objective basis for morality is just your opinion. So welcome to the club, pal.